and welcome to the John Burt Leadership Podcast. Our purpose is to help leaders enhance their leadership skills in order to increase their effectiveness and become more inspiring within their organizations and for their people. Because that's what leadership is all about, inspiring others to think bigger and think differently to accomplish common goals. I'm your host, John Burt, an executive leadership coach. Through this podcast, my aim is to provide you with insights and a fresh perspective on leadership through conversations with incredible guests and sharing thoughts and experiences on leadership. My hope is that this will enable you to address your current challenges and become a more impactful leader, ultimately contributing to making the world a better place. Let's dive right in. All right. Hey, welcome everyone. This is John Burt, your executive leadership coach. I have a very special guest with me today. It's Brent Baker. He's a retired Major General from the U.S. Air Force. Just an amazing guest. He has written a book with regard to leadership. And when I read it, I said, I got to have this guy on the show. He's got some amazing anecdotes and some thoughts around leadership that I think are very important for all of our leaders today. So welcome, Brent. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Josh. It's great to be here. Thanks so much for taking your time and for doing this. And I'm hoping we can help some great leaders out there.
All right. Well, thank you, Brent. I appreciate you coming on to the show. Now, you're an executive in the corporate world now. You're a senior leader with a company called PTC, high-tech software, helping with digital transformation. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I've been really excited. I've been with PTC now about 8 years. As you mentioned, retired general officer out of the Air Force, did that for 37 years. And when I got ready to retire, I really wanted to do something a little bit different. I'd primarily done logistics my whole Air Force career, loved that. But I thought, I want to kind of maybe rebrand myself and, keep myself fresh and do something a little bit different. So I had this amazing opportunity to go to work for a company. Our headquarters is in Boston, and the company's name is PTC. And basically what we do is, like you said, it's I call it industrial software. Everything from computer-aided design, product lifecycle management, the Internet of Things, augmented virtual reality, product lifecycle management for software, advanced spare parts planning. And, so I run our federal aerospace and defense vertical for PTC, and really enjoying learning something new and fresh, software in particular around digital thread, digital transformation.
Oh, fantastic. So Brent, you've also written a book. The title of the book is Orders from the General, Leadership Advice from a Two-Star General. And then it's a rise above using a military mindset for success in any field. Tell us a little bit about why you wrote the book and some of the challenges you had getting it on paper.
Well, I think the greatest challenge that I had was just overcoming self-doubt. I would always ask myself, do I have anything to say that people would benefit from or want to read? And so that always was kind of nagging in my mind. And then, I had an aunt that actually, passed away, and we discovered she had written all these amazing things throughout her life that we didn't know about. And it just inspired me to say, she took the time to write this stuff down, and it was really amazing. So that was kind of my final push, if you will, to kind of get me started to write the book. And the main reason I wrote it, I feel like I've been a very blessed person my whole life. I've had a lot of great leaders, mentors, some bad leaders, examples maybe, but the bottom line is I felt like I've had great assistance on becoming a really good leader throughout my life. And it kind of inspired me to be a student of leadership. And that's really what really inspired me to write the book, because really what I want to do is I want to help others like people help me on my leadership path throughout my career.
Yeah. And Brent, that's exactly what our listeners are looking for, is some of those nuggets, some of those pieces of advice. Now, you said you had spent 37 years in the Air Force. You actually came in as an enlisted Airman Basic, right? Is that true?
I did. I started out as an Airman Basic, enlisted, spent 6 years enlisted. I really cherished my enlisted time. And then I decided, well, if I'm going to stay in the Air Force, which I really enjoyed it, liked it. So I said, well, I'm going to try to become an officer, finished up my college degree, applied to OT at Officer Training School and got selected, and then spent 31 years on the officer side. And again, that's called a Mustang. And I'm really proud that I am a Mustang, and I really enjoyed my entire service.
Yeah. Well, like I said, there's just so many great tidbits or nuggets and sage advice here in your book. I wanted to talk a little bit. You start off your book talking about your leadership style, and as a leadership coach, I do a lot with my clients to get them to have greater self-awareness of themselves and understand what their leadership style is. Because if everyone has one, whether you think about it or not, everyone has one. But I want you to talk a little bit about your leadership style and the importance of understanding your leadership style.
You bet. I think you hit the nail right on the head. I think it's very important to sometimes kind of slow down and have self-reflection on what kind of leader you are. What is your leadership style? Sometimes leadership is very situational. I think most of us understand that. I mean, you would react a little bit different in a crisis situation than maybe a normal day-to-day situation. But my point is, I've had a couple of people throughout my career ask me, like, what is your leadership style? And it really gave me pause to say, well, what is my leadership style? And I think I really kind of discovered along the way, my core leadership style, if you will, is leading by example. And I've always really tried to do that. And I think it resonates with people. I really do. I never, kind of a motto I live by, I would never ask my people to do anything that I wasn't doing, haven't done, or wasn't willing to do. And so I just really tried to lead, by example, and people notice that. Here's a great example. Like if we had a new program come out, like a new physical fitness program for the Air Force, I'd be one of the first people to learn about it, to get out there and do it, maybe bring a bunch of my senior team members with me, and, we'd figure out how this all works. And people really, they notice that. And I think they're drawn to that. And the other thing, you've heard the old saying, do as I say, not as I do, which is a very negative thing. People notice that as well. If you're always, saying you're going to do something, but you do something completely different, that will really hurt your credibility, I think, as a leader. So I've just always kind of adopted this, lead by example, because I think people are drawn to that natural leadership style, if you will.
Right. There are leaders out there that like to sit in their ivory tower or sit in their office all day, and they don't get out amongst the people, or they don't relate. You mentioned in your book that you mentioned the show Undercover Boss, right? Where
exactly
the bosses go out and they actually learn how difficult it is for their people, and some of the rules and some of the processes that put into place. That was wonderful. Now, I think leading by example is one leadership style. There are many that work for different leaders. And certainly leading by example is one that was powerful and has helped you in your career. Another element that you talk about that I personally have written about, and I love this idea of, the power of positivity, or having a positive attitude in the work
Yes.
that you do. Tell us a little about that.
Well, I think, a long time ago, there was a book written, The Power of Positive Thinking. And I didn't really get my thoughts from that. I actually got my thoughts and guidance, if you will, much closer to home. That was from my wife. My wife, after I married her, she's a very positive person. And it used to kind of drive me crazy, to be honest, because every once in a while, I'd kind of like to have maybe a little pity party. You want to kind of get down. And that just doesn't happen in our home. Not with me, not with our kids. That's just not how our family operates now. And it wasn't just her leadership in that area. I kind of noticed how powerful it was. And what I mean by being positive, there's some situations where obviously it's not a good situation, but it's really how you react to that situation that makes all the difference in the world. And one example I talk about in the book is when I was a wing commander, we had a senior chaplain pass away on active duty. And at the time, he was the only active duty chaplain to ever pass away while on active duty. It was really a big deal. He was very known throughout the base, and it was very, very tragic. But I couldn't change that situation. But what we did as a team, and this is to me, again, to me the power of being positive. We said, listen, we're going to make this a great experience for the family. We're going to we're going to pick them up at the airport. We're going to make sure we have meals served with them. We're going to have a great memorial. We had the head chaplain from the Air Force come in to do the actual memorial service. We just did everything we can in a positive manner to make the best of this situation. And I just have learned that if you treat things like that, situations like that, how you react as a leader is very important, because people will be looking at that. They're going to say, is he going to panic? Is he freaking out? Or they look, and if you treat things in a positive, people, again, they kind of get on board with that. And before long, people they're very, very positive, and it's very helpful, I believe.
Yeah. Tough things, there's going to be challenges all the time. There's going to be a crisis. You might have a great morning. You might have a crisis in the afternoon. Leaders deal with that or have to deal with that. So just that idea that you're not being Pollyannish in your thinking, right? It's not you're trying to make it go away or you're trying to ignore that.
Right.
It did happen, but how you respond to it, right? That you're, hey, listen, we're going to get through this, or keeping that like it's a confidence builder for your team. To retain that positive, like we're going to get through this, we're going to make the best of it.
You're exactly right. I saw this again. I was on the ground. I led the logistics effort for Operation Tomodachi, which was the earthquake, tsunami, and the nuclear power plant meltdown in Japan about a decade ago. And it was the same thing. I got my team together and said, listen, we can't change what has happened, but what we're going to do is we're going to be a great team to work with. We're going to be, we're going to be very positive. We're going to be helpful. I know we're all going to be tired, but we're not going to be grouchy. We're going to really, be the positive team. And after it was over, the leader, who was an admiral, came up and said, Brent, I've never seen a team like you had. And he said something like this, said, you guys were always so positive. And he just picked up on that naturally. I never told him that. I just said, this is how we're going to operate as a team. And he even said that you guys were always so positive and you guys got things done and you were always in a positive mood. And it just made such a big difference. So again, I think you said it right. It's not being Pollyannish, like ignoring the event, but it's how you respond afterwards that'll make a big difference as a leader.
Yeah, and in that situation you just described, right? That's what they needed, right? There's so much chaos and so much trauma all around that having a force of good and positive thinking was exactly what that situation needed.
Exactly, 100%.
I really believe in that. It's something that throughout my career I've tried to do, is to be on the positive side of whatever the situation is, even in the toughest times. To the team needs that guidance, that leadership on your part to as the leader, to be able to get through those tough times and know that even if you haven't gone through it yourself, right? You may have, which means, hey, listen, they have the confidence that says, this guy knows what he's doing, or she knows what she's doing. But it's also just that you give them that level of confidence that you're going to bring them through whatever tough time you're going through.
You're exactly right. And something else I noticed too, like people kind of will understand the event, but how you react to it, that's what they're really looking for in a leader.
Right.
And so you're exactly right.
That leads into this other topic that you wrote about, and that's about mentorship. Throughout my life, I for myself personally, I've had such great mentors, many mentors over the course of my life and my career, that have helped me. And you talk a lot about mentorship in your book. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I think it's a great subject, and I think for a while in time, mentorship kind of got a bad name or bad reputation. Mm-hmm. Some people saw it as like a good old boy, good old girl, system. And I personally don't see that. And it shouldn't be like that at all. Maybe it can be, but it shouldn't be. But I'm a big believer in mentorship. And, I've told several folks, I'm where I am today because of others. I stand on their shoulders, quite frankly. And I think most of us that are successful, would admit that. But to me, it's important to mentor those, to help those that are coming up, because let's face it, even if you have the best career in the world, your time is limited, and it's important to grow those folks behind you and help those folks behind you that are going to at some point replace you. One thing I did draw out in the book, besides the fact that I think mentorship is important, is I like to try to mentor those that have a plan, a life or career plan. A lot of times somebody would say, hey, Brent, would you, probably General Baker at the time, but would you mentor me? And I always said, I will mentor you, but you got to kind of tell me what your thoughts are about where you want to go in life and with your career, because those are really different, could be very, very different. If you want to be a CEO of a company in 20 years, well, that's a big difference than you want to, serve for 20 years and retire. Those are two different conversations. So I think mentoring, the mentee also has some responsibility to at least have some general idea of where he or she wants to go.
Yeah, I love that. I think that this idea that we have so many leaders out there that don't really have a plan. Back when I was with, my former company, I did a lot of work with aspiring executives. People were at the level where they were moving into the executive ranks. We worked with them, but the first question I was always ask them is, "What's your plan? What is your big idea that you're going to bring to the executive ranks or to the partnership of this company that we would want you to be an executive?" And people were stumped.
Yes.
What is your big idea? So I love this idea that you have to have some spark, even if that changes along the way. You have to be flexible. And I started off wanting to, probably years ago, wanting to be a fireman. But I remember when I was in grad school, I wanted to go in and be an advertising executive. I thought that was going to be a glamorous job, doing nothing related to that. But the idea is that I had a target and an idea, and it had, I had to build the plan in terms of how to get there. But I think as long as you start with a plan, having an idea and sharing that idea with your mentors, your sponsors, your network, if you will, of people is very important, because it gives them an idea of like how to channel the energy.
I agree. And you're right. It will change. I tell folks to build out like maybe a 5, 10, 20-year plan and then update it, because it will change. But everyone probably has heard the old saying, people don't plan to fail, they fail to plan. And I believe that is really true on careers. A lot of people just kind of go day to day, just kind of wandering through the career. And to me, if you kind of plan out what you want to do, it makes a big, and it really helps your mentor, because your mentor can say, well, if you want to do, X, Y, Z, here's the 3 things, we need to get you into. Here's the jobs you need to take. Here's the education you need to have. It's very, very helpful. And it really helps your mentor as well.
Yeah, and it also points out this difference between, say, a sponsor and a mentor, right? The mentor is simply, somebody who's going to share their story with you, and hopefully you glean the elements from that, versus somebody who you're expecting to be a sponsor who will kind of help you kind of progress further. I had many mentors, because I wanted to get the different perspectives.
Yes.
You mentioned something else about this planning, and I think that this is something that a lot of maybe a lot of executives have challenges with, is that if you're the CEO and you have a 10-year plan in mind in terms of where you want to take the company in 10 years, you also need to be able to break that down into chunks that the people who are working for you, that in their cycle, right? Maybe that's 2-3 years.
Right.
They need to be able to see some activity or some accomplishments along the way. So you have to be able to take that 10-year plan and then break it down into some bite-sized chunks that are relevant for the people who are working with you today or for the next year or two.
You're exactly right. I talk quite a bit in the book about strategic planning. I'm a big believer in strategic planning, but I was always a little suspect when I was like a junior member and they had me planning for, 10-year plan. Because, number one, I'm not going to be in the same job in 10 years. And we all know the world. I mean, look, like COVID completely changed the world in a lot of ways, especially like for digital transfer. Things change fast is my point. So I think there is a place for really long-term strategic planning, but you're exactly right. If you don't take it into a bite, size chunk that people can understand, get behind, actually help create, help influence, I think you lose a lot of folks. And so you're exactly right. The way we do it, like even, with PTC has a long-term vision, but my team is like, okay, what are we going to do in the next 2 to 3 years that we can influence to try to meet this long-term vision? I just feel like that's very important.
Right. Well, channeling that energy, giving people a focus, but something that, can motivate or activate them in today's environment versus waiting for that plan to get realized in 10 years. It's very important for the CEO, but you need to take those steps along the way. Brent, you also talk about this idea that a leader is always on, right? You're in the fishbowl, as you said, and talk a little bit about that, because I think this is just really important for leaders to understand that there's no off switch.
I think it's a funny story in the book. I had a good friend of mine that every time I would go see him in his office, he had an empty fishbowl. And the first time I thought, well, maybe his fish died, or I don't know. And after a couple of times, I finally asked him, and he said, oh, no. He said, I don't have a pet in there. He goes, I'm in the fishbowl. That's my daily reminder to say I'm in the fishbowl as a leader. And, in this case, we were commanders. He said, you're always being watched 24 hours a day. And it just really stuck in my mind. What a great leadership example, because it's so true. As a leader, you're always being observed. People are looking for weaknesses, they're looking for good things, they're looking for bad, but you really have to be on all the time. And some people don't like that. Some people don't they don't want to measure up to that standard. But to me, if you're going to really be an effective leader, you have to kind of understand that going in. And another point I bring out in the book is tied to that is, a leader can never have a bad day. Now, if you look at that title, you think, well, you're going to have a bad day, and you are. But the idea is you can't express bad days. You can't go off the deep end, kind of like we talked about earlier, how you handle situations. But, the idea is it's like a bank. You can put 1,000 good things in your bank, and it only takes one, lapse of integrity or one misjudgment, or you have a bad day, throw a fit. I mean, like that. And that bank account is drained almost immediately.
Yeah, this emotional intelligence, as I call it, is just so important for a leader to recognize the vibes that they're sending out, of the way that they're maybe communicating to their team and impacting their integrity as a leader, the trust that they have with their teams. Brent, I talk a lot in some of my talks and workshops and such around the 3 C's of leadership. That's the character, competence, and communications. You touch on all those in a way in your book. You talk about integrity being the cornerstone. Do you have some stories that you can tell us a little bit about integrity and how that came into play for your career?
Integrity, I think, really is the cornerstone of leadership, because to me, you can be very knowledgeable. You can be a thought leader. You can be successful. You can have money, however you want to define fortune and fame. But if you don't have integrity, I don't think anyone will ever look at you as a real leader. Mm-hmm. And again, I think about like some things in baseball. You have some folks that have broken records, and later they find out, there was an integrity issue. Well, to be honest, I mean, they may have the record, but there might be a little asterisk next to it. But the bottom line, people don't look at those folks as leaders. They just don't. Again, they realize they did ABC, but the bottom line is they'll never really look at them as a leader. And so to me, integrity has to be the cornerstone. And, the Air Force does an amazing job. That their core principles is integrity first and foremost, excellence in all we do, service before self. Those are the 3 kind of cultural leader foundations, if you will, of the Air Force culture. And integrity first and foremost. That was selected for a very particular reason, because like excellence in all we do, service before self, you can do all of that, but if you don't have integrity, you will never be actually, at least in my opinion, viewed as a real leader.
Yeah, and it's building the trust with your team, right? Because so much of what we talk about in leadership is inspiring others to accomplish goals. Right. And in order to inspire people, they need to believe in you. They have to have trust and faith in you. So that integrity really is key. If you lose it, it's very difficult to build that back. It
really is. There are people that, because I think that people have a comeback story. There are people that come back from, bad situations, but it is a long, long road. And so it's best not to give up integrity ever, in my estimation. And John, one thing else I was going to mention, if you think about everything we've talked about, like being in the fishbowl, being positive, leading by example, being a mentor. I mean, all of that really is based on the integrity as a foundation. I mean, think about that. Like people they're not going to follow you as a leader, lead by example, if you don't have integrity. People are probably not going to ask you to be a mentor if they don't think you have integrity. Understand that you're in the fishbowl and you go out and you do something, well, people are going to observe it. So to me, everything we've talked about, integrity is almost like a digital, we talk about digital thread. It's almost like the leadership thread that really kind of ties everything together.
Yeah, and the idea that integrity is that if the tree falls in the forest, right? It's what you do when nobody else is looking. That's what determines whether or not you have integrity or not. So I love this. I love this concept. There's one additional point I want to make around the competence, because we talked about this before. Was that with competence, one of the 3 C's. Many of us develop a particular competence, but then at some point in time, we stop developing. You make a point in your book about this idea that as an individual, you need to remain competitive. And I just think that's super powerful with regard to, individuals. A lot of our organizations, we lead organizations that are trying to be competitive. You're trying to be, sales or get the resources or whatever that competition for you at the organizational level is. But you as an individual need to stay competitive. You need to constantly be regenerating yourself or continuously improving. I mean, what's your, that was a powerful thing for me when I read it. It was incredible.
I do think it's very important. A lot of people get very comfortable in a role or a job or with their level of expertise. But I like to tell folks, if you get comfortable, it's probably time for you to learn something different, quite frankly. And I talk a lot about that in the book. But like even at my point in my life, when I got ready to retire from the Air Force, I mentioned this earlier, I really wanted to do something like new, something exciting. I wanted to kind of like rebrand myself. And so, I end up working, I'm still with a software company, does amazing software. I really kind of latched on to this digital transformation, which has really accelerated since COVID. And I've become really a thought leader in that area. So I just think it's important to stay fresh and always make yourself competitive for yourself personally. I mean, that's important, for your career. But the other thing it does, it makes your organization better. It makes your organization better. I will tell I haven't told a lot of folks this, but I was working with a client and after about a week or something, he said this to me. He said, Brent, he said, you're a great representative of your company. And I will tell you, that may have been one of the best compliments I've ever received in my life. Because, I mean, he didn't say, I like the software, I'm going to buy. I mean, he didn't say any of that, but it saw that I, well represented my company. I knew our products, I knew digital transformation. And when he said, you're amazing, great representative of your company, that meant the world to me, because that's exactly what I think what happens when you make yourself personally more competitive. And the other thing too, it'll help your team up. It'll pull your team up, because as you become more competitive, folks are competitive, I think, by nature. They want to do better. And before long, you've really created a really amazing team.
Yeah, just this idea that leaders need to be continuously improving. I do run into a lot of leaders who will tell me, "Hey, listen, I'm good. I'm comfortable. I'm where I need to be." I always question whether or not that means that they're already working on their own plan, or they're just comfortable, right? So this idea that if you are comfortable as a leader, you probably need to be doing something.
That's exactly what I said earlier. I tell folks all the time, if you're comfortable as a leader in your job, maybe with your education, you're probably either like thinking about retiring, or you don't have any other challenge. You don't want any challenge into your life. Because to me, you should never be comfortable. You should always be reaching, to improve yourself, your company, your business, whatever your pursuit is.
Yeah, and just this idea that you have an obligation, right? If you're in a leadership position, for the organization or for your people, if you're not trying to be the best that you can be, right? If you're not working on yourself, if you're not improving, you're doing a disservice to the people who are reporting to you or that rely upon you in the organization. And I think that's why I think it's so important that leaders continue to kind of press the edge, get beyond or outside their comfort zone to learn something new.
Well, and you think about the world today. The world is changing, like, obviously every day, but it's changing. If you just think of the world I'm in, technology, software, I mean, it changes almost like every 3 months, there's a complete new capability, new cycle, new software. And it just changes all the time. And to me, if you don't keep up, you quickly become a dinosaur. You're outdated. You've outdated yourself, and that doesn't serve you, and it doesn't serve your company.
Well, Brent, it has been really an honor and a privilege to have you on the show today. There's so many different things that we haven't even talked about that are in your book that were just great ideas. But I would just want to plug your book again, because I just think that everyone should be out there reading it. And that's Orders from the General, Leadership Advice from a Two-Star General. It's Brent Baker, Major General retired. So Brent, thank you so much for.
It's my pleasure. And I would just say, I'd love for folks to get my book. Not because it's not a money-making thing. I want folks to understand that. My motivation is, I hope you can pick it up, read it. It's got 50 leadership tips in there that I think are timeless, that you can just kind of refer to. But I hope it helps you, the individual, on your leadership path.
Oh, thank you so much again. I think all of our
My
listeners
pleasure.
are going to appreciate it.
Thanks for reaching out. And I want to commend everybody that's watching this podcast. That tells me they're wanting to be good leaders. So kudos to them as well.
All right. Thanks again, Brent. Speak to you soon. Hey, leaders, I hope you found that conversation with Major General retired Brent Baker as fascinating as I did. What a great leader, 37 years in the Air Force, coming in as an enlisted Airman Basic, and rising to the general officer level. An amazing story. He's now in industry, still doing the same great things, being a great leader, practicing many of the elements that we talked about today and many more. I do really recommend that you pick up his book or take a look at it online. It's Orders from the General, Leadership Advice from a Two-Star General. And it's Brent Baker. He's just a fascinating guy, as many of our guests are on this show. And I hope that you enjoyed this and you found some inspiration and a few tips that you can use in your practice. I know I did. So for those of you who are interested in learning a little bit more about leadership coaching and the practice that I have, please reach out to me. The information on my contact details are in the summary of this podcast. So please take a moment to take a look. And I look forward to having you join us for the next podcast, a John Burt Leadership podcast. You can look for it on Apple, Buzzsprout. I think we're also on Spotify, many places you can listen, and you can pick up some of the earlier editions of this podcast. All right. Thank you again, and we'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye.